You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale. This podcast is sponsored by the PRCA's Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board. Visit prca.org.uk/REEB to find out more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gems in Comms series special, brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels. I am your host, Ebony Gale, and I am very excited today because I am speaking with the lovely Kevin Leonce, who is CEO and founder of Togethr, which is the world's first LGBTQ plus multiverse community platform and marketplace. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Albany, and hello to everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Now, just as a start and a bit of a caveat, this podcast basically is about celebrating and giving flowers to people of colour working in comms in particular, and PR and comms industry, because we know it's quite a white industry. So it's all about giving us our flowers. So well done to you for carving out a great piece of the pie for yourself and doing some great things as well in your journey. So let's start off by getting you to sort of tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. So at the moment, I am a co-founder and CEO of Togethr. It's, like I said, the world's first LGBTQ plus multiverse or community space and platform. But in essence, what we want to be able to do is to build a community for all communities within the LGBTQIA plus space itself. We do have quite a lot of intersections. And what we tend to see and find is that over the horizon, there isn't sort of like a destined space for us. We've always carved out spaces, and having so many intersections has always proved to be a bit of a challenge in terms of how do you bring those together. So what we're hoping is that by building together, we'll be able to do that. A little bit more about me. My background first started in marketing and also a bit of entrepreneurship. And then it's sort of like morphed into incorporating bits on comms and PR, but those elements were always there. So I found in my most recent years, I've been having to do a lot more focus within the comms space, which I found was quite interesting. And like I said, it's a space that's not really dominated, or you don't tend to see quite a lot of us within that space. So when you do see each other, you kind of go, yes. So yeah, it's been pretty exciting and sort of like, carving those out. Within marketing, it's not as bad as, but it's not too far off from it. But it's been really interesting in sort of like working within that space, getting to understand how we come together, how we use the platforms that we have, not just for ourselves, but collectively for those who are coming up behind us or coming up with us, to ensure that we are creating more of that space for us. And like I say, if you're not getting an invite to the table, destroy the table and build your own. So
I agree. Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Build your own table, pull up a chair. Okay. Yeah. I love it. So my next question is, have you always wanted to work in sort of the communications industry? So you said started off out in marketing, didn't you? So what kind of attracted you to it?
I think it was one of the areas that I didn't necessarily work directly in. I think when you look across within marketing, PR, comms, digital marketing, content marketing, they all sort of have a relevance, but they also connect in the same way. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, what kind of like got me into like, let me see what I look like in that comm space, was just wanting to utilize and just add to what I already had as a baseline, but also take you back a couple of years when I eventually decided to accept my sexuality in terms of the professional space. One of the things that I embarked upon was wanting to be able to give back to the community that I'm part of. Yeah. And that led me down the road at the time, being a deputy director within a comms remit for a Pride organization. And I think that's when I really kind of like dived into it, but also I got to use a lot of the experience I had in marketing to realize that, a lot of things that we were already doing, it's just about just finessing it and keeping it short. And I like to talk. So it's like, comms is like, yeah, what's the message?
Yeah.
3 points. That's it. Marketing is about, we'll sell you the story. It's like, no. What's the message? What's the message? Yeah. So, for me, it was a challenge of wanting to enter into an area that I didn't necessarily have a core remit in, and seeing how that kind of like builds into sort of like my marketing repertoire.
Cool, interesting. And to me, I feel like we're all part of the same family, aren't we? Marketing, comms, PR.
Yes.
Even though there's a lot of competition, it's all part of the same story. It's telling stories, and it's giving it to different ways, and meeting audiences where they are at. So that to me seems like a nice progression for you. Absolutely. And to be in a private organization, great way to embrace who you are and to actually help to champion it as well. So that sounds really like a fun role for you. So my next question is more about your kind of lived experience. So I always like to ask, when did you become aware of your ethnicity? So for me, obviously we're born in the skin we are, so we already know, we're Black people, we know this. But what I'm talking about for me in particular, when it really hit home, the difference is when I was 11 years old and I was starting secondary school at the time. And now I live in South London. And so at this point in South London, it was known to be a group of like racist thugs that would go around called Chelsea Smilers. They'd take a razor blade and they'd cut you from sort of one side to the next. Only Black and Asian, people that they would target. And they give you like what they call the Chelsea smile that cut you across the face situation. And I remember hearing about that when I was starting secondary school. And obviously I'm off to school on my own and I'm heading towards that kind of racist area. And so I remember being kind of petrified, but also very, very aware of myself at that particular point. And mind, I've seen other things, but at that point, it does really sit with me as a poignant point in life. So for you, what would be your kind of moment?
It's such a shame to hear some of the experiences of like that of awareness, and just hearing you talk about that just alone sounds quite terrifying. And I'm hopeful that we've moved on from those particular scenarios. I know we're still faced with quite others. I think I had a few moments for me. I think my first moment was in a professional space. I would say actually no, first within a personal space. Having grown up in the Caribbean, it was quite a very different environment where you've got the 1%, but they also have that sort of racism, but it sits at different levels. So you have the first layer that was kind of like, well, you're not white, but then you're close enough, or you're not Black enough. And I think for me, when I left, as I was leaving college, I got to understand and see what that was like firsthand, not necessarily for myself in some cases, but definitely when I started looking around the horizon amongst my friends. When we were in college, we would tease each other and sort of like give that sort of like reverse racism. But for us, it was a way of breaking those stereotypes down, and calling each other, that's my brother, from another mother. And when I looked back, when I first came to the UK, actually, and I reflect upon those moments, I realized when people were looking at us and they weren't smiling, we thought they were kind of like saying, okay, you're not allowed to say that because you're not allowed to say that. But it was more of them being slightly more disgusted of the fact that to us, it did not matter. We didn't look at it in that way. We never saw each other in that way. My arrival in the UK really brought that to light. Whereas it was, it was just kind of like us versus them kind of thing. And it was a very clear cut kind of, okay, wow. Okay, this is interesting.
This is new.
And I think, I know it was, but because I was born in Trinidad, and because to an extent, there is that level of racism, but it's racism by color tone. But then there's also racism itself. And I would always see. I remember while I was here, I was having a conversation with friends, and we were talking, and someone looked at me and said, "You don't know what it's like to experience racism, because, look at your skin tone and the way you speak, and the schools you went to. And I was just kind of like, I'm still Black.
You're still Black. I was going to say that. It doesn't change anything.
But it was that, yeah, but it was that kind of like, correct. It was that sort of like degree of it. I think the second time it really hit was in the professional space, and that's when I realized that, particularly within marketing, it was just kind of like I was hitting a brick wall, and to be honest, the way that I started getting into marketing roles was after I founded my own business. I came together with a group of people. Interesting enough, the majority were diverse and underestimated by color, but also underestimated by skill set. Yeah. And we got together and produced a digital magazine on mobile phones and video games. We had people who had reached out to the likes of the major publications, and they were like, yeah, when you have your article published in X, Y, or Z, then come to us. So that was my second sort of like foray into like the sort of marketing, albeit that I had a degree already in marketing. It was quite interesting to see that there was still that kind of wall, which only came down or started coming down after I started Phonica magazines, maybe 4 years in, when we were kind of like winding it down after 5 years. And that's when I started kind of like getting into what was then called content marketing. But before then, there was no name for it. It was just blogging. And because we had built that experience up in terms of, how do you build a publication, but how do you build an online website so that you're actually feeding content in to get people interested, what does that SEO look like, et cetera. And because we did it in such a accelerated startup environment, it really taught me quite a lot. And that was my entry into like marketing in the UK. When I got into it, it was still, that's when the other shock hit of the microaggression types of racism, or being aware of my ethnicity. I would sit in rooms and, I would see how non-white people were referred to, and it was always very worded or weaponized in terms of the words that were used, aggressive, angry, loud. But for a white person or non-Black, the words that were used was, passionate, they really like what they do. They want to make a difference in this world. And I was just like, listen, these mofos are the same people.
Exactly.
Like, what are you doing? And, I just watched, and I think, for me, that was quite a shock. To the point where I then started reevaluating how I interact with people, but also how I portray myself. I became quite guarded. I keep, like, I remember one of my old board members from a company I worked with used to come up to me and be like, he's like, you're the silent assassin. And I said, why would you say that? He's like, you don't say much. He's like, but when you speak, he's like, you really hit the nail. And I'm just like, well, yes, because I see how things have, I've had the experience of working over the years and seeing how things went. So yeah, that was kind of like when I became aware of it in those kind of like two scenarios.
Yeah, very interesting scenarios as well. And I like to hear that, because obviously it's different cultural perspective of you coming from the Caribbean to hear a bit. Like I interviewed Katrina Marshall as well. She came from Barbados, so she spoke about coming to here and that difference and really meeting it in the workforce and seeing that, like you said, that you start to, whoa, you're coming up against some walls here, and it's,
Karen is real. Like,
and even she spoke about an example where she was put forward for a job and they asked her to sing a jingle. I'm like, pardon? Sing a jingle? Who gets asked to sing jingles? Who? So yes, I get it. It's interesting. So on to the next question, which is more still about the ethnicity side of things. Because what I want to know is, have you ever felt like your race or ethnicity has held you back in your career?
I think there were instances that I look back and I would say yes. But one of the things, I always say to people is that Britain, as an entity, has had centuries of being able to craft and weaponize how they deliver things. they're the master of comms and marketing in terms of, from the recollection of events to how things are phrased and worded, etc. They have crafted that. They went from ruling the seas to creating an entity known as the Commonwealth, where they were still able to use their influence by words to continue that level of slavery, not from a physical component, but from a mental component. So I think for me, when I look back at moments, I think the first one I experienced was a job I went for. And to be honest, I knew I wasn't going to get it because I had quite a not so great experience with the person who was leading on the recruitment, but I still went forward for the job because I wanted to see what the experience was going to be like. And while I didn't get the job, and I still couldn't pinpoint, was it really my race or ethnicity that held me back? There were a few things that kind of like came out from that kind of like led me to think that, but it was also quite covered in such a way that, it left you kind of thinking, is this really, and the positive I took from that experience, while I didn't get it, and I still think that my ethnicity or race held me back, was the fact that when I was leaving the interview, I was told right away, unfortunately, you've not got the job. And I was a lot younger. So in those days, it was just like slip of the tongue. It wasn't slip of the tongue. I was just like, I was feisty. So I was like, yeah, I know I wasn't going to get the job. And, it was just like, why? It's like, let's face it, you don't like me.
You know that, don't you?
Because for me, I'm just like, I'm one for calling the elephant in the room. Like, unless we address the elephant in the room and we actually say, hey, the elephant is here, how can we actually get the elephant out of the room? So, I watched the appearance change, but what I found and I took as a positive from that was that, the interviewer then went on to kind of share in their version why they didn't like me, but it wasn't more so about didn't like, it was more so about how I was portraying myself and how I was operating. And for them, they hadn't come across someone like that. Like they said to me, our company had sort of absorbed theirs. I walked into a board meeting, massive, it was like almost 20, 30 people. Everyone came in with like their laptops and their notepads. And I just came in with at the time it was a BlackBerry. And I just put the phone down and I sat and I folded my arms. And, in their minds, I remember they actually said they were just like, what an arrogant prick. And, that's what they were saying to themselves. And then, of course, it was an entire presentation of almost like just over an hour. And, what then ensued was quite interesting. And I didn't realize that how I was being observed. And they said, out of everyone that was sitting in that room, I was the only person that asked questions that was literally hitting the nail on the head that showed I was paying attention. Yeah. And to them, it was like another thing of like, what is this?
It's the audacity. He's got questions.
Yes.
The audacity of this man.
And that kind of continued during the time that we kind of worked, not closely together because they were, 2 or 3 levels above me. But it was always that thing that to them, it was just kind of like, they weren't used to this. They weren't used to that type of like, and I was just like, for me, that's when I became aware that even though within that explanation, it was just like, you're trying to say to me what? So you're not used to, Black educated people,
basically,
actually not sitting there taking notes, not sitting there just like lapping up every word you say, and then having to be coming back to you with like intelligent questions or questions that are actually pertinent to the merger and how we're going to continue and what does the customer fee look like, and I was 23 at the time. So for me, I was just kind of like, my parents spent thousands of dollars educating me. So I'm just like, what were you expecting?
Exactly.
But it really did hit me. And I turned that negative into a positive because to me, that's one of my strengths in anything that I do, in any role that I go into, and it'll also be applied to Togethr. I have that articulation, but it's also a case of, as Black people, especially in comms, you probably have to work 4 times as hard to get a quarter of what they have. And I don't think people realize that, coming from any non-white household, you're always pushed a lot harder because the doors don't open the same way for you. So the things that we can naturally do and hit the ground running with isn't because we want to be arrogant or cocky or whatever a white person's perception is. It's because we had, really challenging taskmasters, that set a framework in our head that said, hey, we're going to put 20 pounds of sandbags on you and you need to learn to jump and hit that hoop. Yeah. While a white person is just like, hey, you just need to jump. So we learned to jump and hit that hoop. So when you take those bags off, when you take those sort of like microaggressions, when you take those, those scenarios where we don't feel confident away, that's why we spring 4 times faster, because we've been training at a level that they're not training to. Yeah. And that was a positive that I took away from that. And instead of it being a weakness, I then use it as my strength, as my shield. Anything I go into, I tell people, the first thing I say is just like, I may not always remember everything, but this is what I'm good at.
Yes.
And here are the things I'm not so good at. Yes. And I don't think people are used to seeing that level of confidence coming from non-white people. Because I've been in interview panels and I've seen how they deliver stuff. I've seen people get jobs and I just go, if it was up to me, child, there's no way you were getting that job because your skill set is not suitable. But they were cheeky and fun and, they said all the right things, and I was just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna take some of these things as well. I'm going to go into that room and say the thing that's on my mind, but still within a professional environment because I'm also a human being, I'm going to bring me to the table.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That is right. That's so interesting. Really interesting. And then my other questions follow up on that would be, obviously you have seen it, hold you back in your career, but have you experienced it or witnessed racism in the workplace? And if so, how was it actually handled?
I've experienced a few myself, and I've experienced it with others around me. And I think for this, I'd like to, give space to those because, I think it's good to share those experiences of others and uplift and see how we can kind of like move forward from those, but also how we can become better allies. Mm-hmm. I was in a role where a couple of years back, I was more senior, than the person that was going through this process, and I watched how people at my level dealt with this particular individual, and the first thing that I noticed within it was the conversations that were happening at our level and how they were being worded, in terms of, again, it was just kind of like, why does she have to be so loud? Why does she always come across so aggressive? Why is it like she's not paying attention? She's, she seems very distant and cold and all of these different things. And, I listened the first time, I listened the second time, and the third time I said, I've got to draw a line in the sand here. It's like, because I get that while we're dealing with performance issues and talking about performance issues, we've got to focus on performance issues. I said, but so far from the commentary, it doesn't seem that it was actually geared towards the performance issues. I said, and to be honest, a lot of those things that you describe is me.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm not rolling over and playing dead, And I think the first thing that I noticed with that was the shock of, and then the quick succession of, no, that's not what we're trying to say. And I was like, we're colleagues. We agree we can have these conversations because it's going to be Clash of the Giants and the Titans. So let's clash. Don't roll back from it. This is now the third time that it's come up. And I watched people try to craft and justify a rationale to what they were saying, trying to link it quickly back to performance or the core of the matter. And, for me, it was something that I've noticed and I've seen since then over the years, different iterations of it. And when you talk to non-white people, that's the underlying that you always hear for those who actually hear the other side of things. It's just like, that person or people or group of people are always trying to justify why they said what they said, and get everyone else to kind of like buy into that. And I was just like, no, we not don't do that. It was wrong. If you came in here and said, Jane came to work late 10 times, I spoke to her about it 10 times. Unfortunately, this hasn't changed. So this is the pathway that we're going to recommend passing on to the appropriate HR person so that they can then manage this process and see what comes place. It was just like, everything else is irrelevant. I said, everything else is relevant. I said, maybe Jane is folding her arms when you come to her because she's already feeling that energy and vibe that you don't want her there. And you've already made a decision that it doesn't matter what's coming. You've already made that decision.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like, no, this is not what it. I was like, well, I'm your colleague and you're having this conversation. I said, and it's not even hits you that I'm black.
Exactly.
I said, and before you say it, please don't say, no, I'm not like Jane.
Racist, or I'm not this, or I'm not. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't go there. Don't go there. So yeah, it was interesting to watch. And the reason I said let me call to those is because I've seen quite a lot of those over the years. Because I think there are three types of people. There are people who experience or witness racism and have the strength mentally, emotionally, and the stability to be able to stand up and challenge for themselves and on behalf of others. Mm-hmm. There are those who don't feel that they're confident enough and that if they do stand up, they will probably end up like Jane. So they say nothing. And then there are others who don't say anything because it's like, well, it's not my fight, not my this, not my anything. That kind of like, first they came for the Irish, then they came for the blacks, and then they, that type of scenario. So yeah, I think for me, I've seen them all, but my first approach is always, as long as I am in a mentally okay place and I feel confident enough to stand up or to say something, I will do that. And I would always encourage anyone and everyone in the same manner, don't just say something for the sake of saying it. And then you're not in that emotional safe space that you can really be grounded enough for what comes next. Because if you're not grounded for it, then it doesn't really help the narrative. It doesn't help the conversation. It doesn't help changing things, because then we give them that opportunity to really say, here's another black angry person. So for me, whenever I spoke, it was always, no, I listened to you. This is what I noticed. This is what it was. And I already had the next 4 steps mapped out of what they were going to come back with rebuttals, because I'm like, I knew I'm ready for you. The comms came out, the comms. I was ready for the response. I was ready for the crisis management. Exactly. I was ready for the reputational management. I was just ready. I was just like, which answer are you going to use? I'm okay, right. This one.
I have a rebuttal. I've got my rebuttals on set.
Yep. Yep.
I love it.
Focus on the messaging. Focus on the messaging. So yeah.
Oh no, that's really cool. That's a really good example, and I appreciate you actually sharing that. So in that instance, did it actually get sorted, or did that employee end up getting support, or did she end up having to leave? Is my question on that.
Unfortunately, she ended up having to leave. And I think it was because it had gone too far.
Yeah.
And also because there were underlying things that were involved. And because at the level, it wasn't somebody that was directly reporting to me. It wasn't something that I could have, reached out without it, seeing stuff. And I think in that particular instance, having then been made aware of what's taking place over the sort of like 12-month period, I think they were worn down at that stage. Yeah. So at that stage, they were just kind of like, I'm going to let you all have it. Yeah. I'm going to give you that. You've already painted me this way, so I'm going to give it to you. And I think for me, I wasn't able to do much in that scenario, because I think that would have then exposed me in a case of, this is not your employee, this is not your fight, this is not anything to do with you. While that didn't get resolved, what I was then able to do was to challenge my colleagues to ensure that it didn't happen again, and to ensure that we were working with HR to put the right performance measures in place, but also to ensure that we were training and looking at things from that perspective. I then started bringing up things like neurodivergence. I don't use, I tend not to use Windows laptops. I've not used a Windows. I mean, I'm speaking to you from an iPad, of my Macs here. So for me, when I'm going into a job and they say, here's a £2,000 Windows laptop, I'll be like, you really don't want me to be productive because I just can't do it.
Yeah. Same.
It's been over 20 years. So,
yeah. Same.
Yeah. So for me, what I was able to do was not go in on the card that they were expecting me to lead on.
Yeah.
But starting from something that really threw them off. Again, comms, it threw everyone off, because the thing about it was, when I first sat at the board meeting and said, hey, there's a few things that I'd like to discuss. Everyone thought, yeah, he's coming for that Jane scenario. And I just started on the neurodivergent. I was like, this is why I think we need to be looking at our policies, not just for this, but for other instances, and then brought it in. Now, someone might say, why didn't you lead the charge on the most pertinent thing? But it's like, it's not just about picking your battles, but you've got to be able to ensure that you're always steps ahead of them, because they now had time to prepare. They had their rebuttals of, he's going to come with this particular thing. And so when I started with that, everyone was just kind of like,
yeah, threw them off.
Where's
like,
the sheet?
we're expecting this.
Yeah. It's like, so, and that led to a lot of positive change, within the next 6 months or so. And to me, I don't know where it ended up, but I was glad to see that change, not just for Black people, but for people of faith as well, people who are with learning disabilities, neurodivergence, just things like, it's like, hey, has anyone ever thought about when we say that we're closing the office for Christmas? What about people who don't celebrate Christmas?
Yeah.
What if I celebrate some other, religious day of the year, etc.? How can we always talk about Christmas and Thanksgiving, but what about Eid? And in that time, I mean, now it's different, but we're talking about almost 10, 11 years ago, to even start talking about things again, people look at you going, why are you talking about this? This has nothing to do with you. And it's like, yeah, it does.
It does.
First you came for them, and it will eventually you're going to get to us. So I think that really did bring about a change. It brought about a change. And it was interesting that you now start seeing companies doing it in a very different way when it comes to things like Mother's Day, where they kind of like ask you to opt out if you find it too triggering or traumatic. And it was just like, I'm just like, while I didn't start that idea, it's nice to see things kind of like filtering across. So for me, yes, it did make a difference in that scenario, but it helped. Hopefully for those who came afterwards, that they now had a process that was clearly outlined that said, focus on my performance. And my work behavior, as opposed to your perception of how you think I should react and engage.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's a good example. And to be fair, you've covered up a couple of my questions with that example, because my question was going to be about, was there a time you spoken up about something and you did? Was there a time you self-advocated and you did? Even within all that scenarios, because even whilst speaking up for the Jane character, by even saying, well, that's me, that would have definitely thrown somebody off. Absolutely. Because whilst they're ready to launch into their having a bit of a moan and a bit of a bitch about the person, it was just like, whoa, that would stop you in your tracks and be like, oh, actually, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And you'll get a lot of backpedaling. So I think that was really good and a good way to do it.
This podcast is sponsored by the PRCA's Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board. Visit prca.org.uk/REEB to find out more.
Okay, so thanks for sharing that, Kevin. And another question I do have for you is around code switching. So do you feel like, we can lead with our authentic voices in the workplace, or will we be forever code switching?
Good question. So I think there's been a lot of advancement, I should not say advancement. I think there's been growth of institutions, of people, of organizations, that we are beginning to see a lot more of authenticity in terms of voice turning up in the workplace. I think that we still have a long way to go in terms of actually being able to turn up with true authentic voices, because for non-white for non-whites, particularly within black cultures, African and Caribbean, you have to pound to get along. Pekong and banter is like woo. So our authentic voices are quite interesting, in terms of the way we see the world, in terms of the way we interact with each other, in terms of the way that we move forward. You just have to look at Shade Room in terms of some of the comments you see when they post things, and you go, "My gosh, who thought of that?" Like seriously, but it's funny. But seriously,
Right.
so I think that there's a few angles on this. There's the first angle of that bit of code switching till you feel confident enough and you've built your skill set up enough that you can then bring your true authentic voice to the table. There are others who are confident from day one, and they can just get in there and be their authentic selves, and they're willing to push through that resistance and still build their skill set. And neither of those routes are right or wrong. It's down to the individuals. For myself, I stayed quiet, and I say quiet. I did the code switching for quite some time until I had enough experience under my belt that I could have brought my authentic self to the table. Because while I was doing that, I could cheekily tell you, yeah, you can go do this with someone else, but they wouldn't do it 4 times as fast as I do. And quite frankly, I've already taught 4 different scenarios of reputational stuff, and here you go. You could take it to them. But this is what you get with me versus what you get with someone else, But that took years of me focusing on my skill set and not bringing my fully authentic voice to the table. I will still find ways and means to be able to bring it, but I always knew when to reel it in. We always have those moments when someone goes, "I beg your pardon." It's like, "Oh yeah." Whereas now it's kind of like, "I beg your pardon. Yes, you heard me say it the first time, so let me say it louder so the people in the back can hear." I did not stutter, Karen. I'm ready for you now.
Yes, indeed.
But that took some time. It took emotional, it took physical, it took mental, it took skill set, learning of skill set. It took growth to be able to do that. So I think when it comes to code switching, those are the sort of like, the options out there. I know that when my first managerial job, I was 21. And I remember my boss saying some things to me. And, at the time she was like, "You're young." She's like, "I get that you're passionate and you're fiery and you want to do all those things." She's like, "But sometimes you've got to pick your battles." And she's like, right now, she's like, it ain't going to help you, because you're going to be labeled as, "Oh yeah, here's a young person, fiery, not much experience, not much, all of those different things that they already have put in that category." Or you could take things with a pinch of salt, build your experience, build your skill set, and be that leader that you wanted to see in the environment when you have that strong base. And for me, that's what I took from that first conversation when she was talking, and I was just like, yeah. She's like, "These are not your mates." I was just like, "Yeah, they are. We're young." And she's like, "Don't do that." But it took that I took that away from it, and that's how I was able to build with mine. Because when I look back at those moments, I was fighting the minute I did that in terms of the code switching, I still had battles, but the battles that I was facing versus the ones that were there before, it was almost as if my authenticity was creating a lot more friction than possible.
Okay.
Which is always the case. But it then meant that the time and effort that I was taking to have to push through that resistance, I was able to focus on honing my skill. And, one thing, again, many years ago, when I first started in business, one of my father's friends, said to me when he found out that I was, part of the LGBTQ plus community, he said, "Let me tell you this." He's like, "Doesn't matter about your sexuality. doesn't matter what you do in the privacy of your home once it's legal. He's like, as long as when they are speaking, the first thing that they're saying is, Kevin is good at.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin is amazing at. He's like, nothing else matters. He said the minute they have to start with your behavior, your true self in terms of your sexuality, etc. He said, in the environment that I was growing up in, he said, you've lost the battle.
Right.
So for me, it was, I focused on my skill set because that was my strength. That was the thing that got me to the table. That was the thing that was like, yeah, I know you don't like me. I know you're not, I know you're homophobic. I know that your views are on trans people, etc. But you're not going to bring that heat to me because you know.
Yeah.
One, I'm not going to tolerate it. And two, you need me.
Yeah.
You need what I bring to the table.
Right.
So you're going to behave nicely and beat and play to my drum in this scenario because you need it. And I think to me, that was the thing that I found to be a lot more powerful. And I found that it helped a lot more because it helped in some cases, not all, it helped to change some of the perception of people that were around me in the working environment over the years. You know, I've had people walk and go, I really had a very different interpretation of what, you know, a gay person would be, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like, listen, you know, I said it in a meeting once. Someone said to me, just like, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't realize that you were gay. And I was like, yeah. I said, but listen, I'm gay. I'm not desperate. I was like, so you're safe.
Exactly.
And, you know, his whole face just went like, he was just like, what? And we laughed about it and everybody. And that's when he was just like, you've got banter. I was like, well, yeah, but I'm also being serious. I ain't desperate.
That's right.
You know, well done to your other half partner, whoever they may be. God bless them. But on behalf of the LGBT community, we don't want you. Take it back. Take it back. Take it back.
That's hilarious.
That led to kind of like demystifying things. It led to kind of like de-escalating things because it was just kind of like, again, perceptions that exist. Is just like every member of the LGBT community is interested in that person, you know, in that professional environment. I'm just like, no, this is work.
It works. Yeah.
You better do my work.
Yeah, exactly. But I always find that strange. Like, you know, it's like, well, I didn't know he was gay. It was like, I mean, mine's slightly different. I remember I was giving an example to Barbara about racism at work. And I was saying that I used to work for the General Medical Council, so the doctor's regulator, but in the press office. So I still have a lot of the high profile, you know, finished practice cases. And I used to always also speak to doctors sometimes. And I had a call from a retired doctor, a very posh young, you know, old guy in his penthouse asking about something. I helped him with his query. And then towards the ending, he was like, oh, thanks so much for your help. What's your name? I said, my name is Ebony. Ebony, are you coloured? You know, it was, oh my gosh, you're so well spoken. I had no idea. It's like, I was like, well, firstly, I'm not coloured. I'm black. But yes. I speak like this. We do speak. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, what the hell? What are you thinking? You know, so what do you expect? Okay, that's one voice. And they speak, they actually with you. And then turn around and say, well, oh, I had no idea. What were you expecting? You know, they come to work, I'm doing my job, and I'm also being me.
Yeah. And it you know what, I've experienced that as well. You know, my surname, you know, I've gone to places where people started speaking to me in French, and I'm like, English, please.
English, yes.
And, you know, it's just like, but it's like, it's like, long story. When we get familiar, I'm going to tell you about it. But English. Thank you.
Exactly.
You know, I was talking to a friend recently, and she was telling me that, you know, she was going on interviews and she wasn't getting anywhere. And, you know, it was shocking to hear her say it. And I also felt for her because she was just like, I know that sometimes I was being asked to attend interviews, not because I was going to get the job, but they just wanted to see who was the person behind this voice and this name. Because the voice and the name gives that you're one of us. But we're looking at things and we're like, And, you know, for me, it was just kind of like, okay, fine. I am a male, but I'm gay. But, you know, she's straight and a woman. And I'm just like, it still hits to know that, you know, it doesn't matter, we're both black. Yep. And to know that, you know, you're going into a scenario where you're going to an interview in a comms environment and they're just there. You're just there for the horse and pony show to be like, somebody made a bet somewhere in that office or somewhere in that process. And that bet was like, no, she can't be Black. No, not with that name. No. And I can only imagine the derogatory things that may potentially have been filtered into that. And then having to go in knowing that you're not going to get the job, but you're still going on the odd basis of, well, just what if I was wrong this time? Because I want to be in comms. I want to push myself in comms. So what if I was wrong? What if I turn this one interview down? Even though I know in the back of my mind, it sounds like they just want me to come in because based on what someone said, like, oh my gosh, you've got such a, oh my God, you speak so well, and your degree is like, what's your background? And I was just like, I kept saying to us, like, first off, your first defense now is anybody asks you about your background, none of their business.
No, it's
if
not.
they want, they can put it forward. They should have HR systems, recruitment systems actually in place that if they want to collect that anonymously, they can do so within the recruitment process. I said, if you find yourself going forward, anyone asking you about your background or where you lived or what part of South London you're from, I was like, no, draw the line, call it out, and let them know you're calling it out. It doesn't matter if you don't get the job. They're now going to be walking away thinking, because I said, listen, you're still in comms. You might not be in their comms, but you're in comms.
You're for comms.
As we saw recently with the interview, can't remember the chap's name, of going to the hotel and being told about his hairstyle and grooming, etc. And it's just kind of like, you still think that it's like, this is 2023, and you both still have the audacity. You still feel emboldened enough in this day and age, after Black Lives Matter uprising, after all the things that we have seen played out on world stages, etc., you still have the audacity to really think that you can have this conversation. No, we've still got work to do.
You still have a lot of work to do, trust me. I know. Yeah. It's so frustrating when you hear those things from friends or colleagues that are going for roles, and it's just like, this is not we shouldn't be having to deal with this at this day and age. Like, this is absolutely unacceptable. So no, I hear you on that one. And as we mentioned that, my question for you is, when did you become aware of the colour bias in PR and comms? Was that once you came to the UK, you started to see how biased it was?
So when I came to the UK, I noticed it in marketing because I started in marketing.
Okay.
When I started my journey along the comms route, sort of like 7, 8, 9, maybe up to 10 years ago, I then saw what it was like there and realized, oh my God, this is even worse because, PR comms is a lot closer aligned to media and press than marketing is.
Yeah.
And I watched it, in terms of the way news articles were being reported, the way that some companies were being sort of like portrayed, the way that sort of like press releases were being written. And I was just like, the way that even the job roles that you see sometimes, because again, I when I started, I had that digital and gaming magazine publication. So while I wasn't predominantly in a comms-driven role, I was dealing with a lot of PR agencies and firms for all of these major gaming publications, etc., etc. So when you walk into their office, I remember going into an office once and I sat down and someone looked at me and said, oh, can you get me a coffee? And I just went, I've got one, thanks.
That's right.
And the look on his face was just kind of like, what? I was just like, and to me, the next thing was in my mind, I was just like, go on, say it. Come on.
Exactly.
Come on.
Say more, please.
Let's go.
Bring out some Vaseline.
It was the face, the shock with it. And then I watched in those offices where you saw a pattern in terms of who were the types of interns that were being put forward, and the ones you saw it. I saw the ones who would be sending emails late at night when you send requests in, or after you got to meet people face to face, and you see the ones who would be like turning up to like the grand event, and then when you ask for particular people, they're like, oh yeah, they're back there, or they're by a table handing out leaflets, or having to do all the unpacking and packing, and those types of things. I that's when I really became aware of that sort of like bias in PR and comms, and to the point where while I wasn't in a comms role, I started using our platform and space to be like, I specifically want to work with X. I specifically want to work with Y. You're really good, but here's what. I think this person, not my place, but I'd like to work with them on this project, etc., because they brought out some ideas, in the meeting that I thought were really good, and if I was ever in an environment where I had the opportunity to ask those people directly in front of everyone else, I would, because I'm just like, okay, fine. It might make things harder for you when I walk out the office, but at least you know that you're there. At least you know somebody as you're seen.
Yeah.
There's visibility.
Yeah.
And okay, fine. It might put a bit of pressure on you at the time, but at least you know this is what visibility comes with. But also, you know that I was seen, so I could take this heat. Yeah, I don't have control over PR agencies and who works on what teams and accounts, etc. And I think in one instance, someone point blank said to me, yeah, they don't really work in those types of projects. So, and also this is our PR firm, not yours.
Yeah.
So and I still wanted to work with them. So I had to be very careful of what I did next or what I said next. But it's still, to me, it was just kind of like every opportunity that I can get to politely shake that table, I'ma shake it.
Yeah. I agree.
So yeah, that's when I kind of like really noticed it within sort of like PR and comms, and then filtering into like media and press. And well, we all know what we're going through at the moment, so it's just kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting. And so, and you have already alluded to PR and comms being worse than marketing, you'd say, with the bias, the color bias. So I think that's also interesting itself.
It is, and I'll tell you why. Because within marketing, it was quite that kind of wall, but that wall's coming down a lot faster. And because of the influx of video content, digital content, etc. It's really bringing, and also music as well, is bringing an entry and a feel into different places. And when you have artists like Stormzy and others who are sort of like pulling from all depths, it's helping to bring those down a lot faster. Now we need those stalwarts to be able to do the same within the PR and comms world and be like, right, who are the people who are reporting on these? So I think that's why I said it's a lot worse, because within marketing, there's a lot more champions that are visible, that have been sort of like chipping away at that sort of wall. Whereas within comms, not saying that they don't exist, but it's like they probably started where marketing was 15, 20 years ago, and they're building that up, and it's now working its way. And you're seeing that visibility, but it's not as fast as being on par within the marketing space kind of thing.
Yeah. I think you're quite right, though, because I do a little bit of marketing work, and when I look on LinkedIn, I do see more black, brown faces in marketing than you do in PR comms specifically. So I think you've got a point there. So moving on to allyship, I wanted to get your thoughts on allyship and what it means to you, and what an example of good allyship is.
Another good one. I think allyship on the whole is understanding your difference and understanding others in their difference, and knowing that you can still find that commonality of, while I may not fully know the ins and outs of someone, I still have respect for them as a human being, because at the base level, at the foundation, I may be a man, you may be a woman, someone may be a trans male or female, someone may be non-binary, but we can all say, at least we don't know of any extraterrestrials, we are all human.
Yes.
You can't change that. And and I think for me, that's where allyship really starts at that core of, this is what it is. I think it then goes on to being able to understand those differences, but also ask the questions, and not being afraid of asking those questions, because you're actually asking about it from a genuine place, from a place of authenticity, from a place of, I really want to know about this difference and why it's different. Because when you begin to know about the difference and you understand it, even to a small degree, that's when the allyship turns into championship and protection. That's when it really becomes so, okay, yeah, I'm an ally, because I can tell, there's some people that sit down and it's like, yeah, I support, the LGBTQ plus community, this is who you are, etc., etc. But if a conversation is happening, I don't think I can see them being that defense, being that protector, because while they are allies and they understand there's a difference, they don't understand the difference.
Right.
And they've never really taken that time. And I think when you have allyship that grows into that defense and championship, that's when it becomes powerful. That's when you don't need to be at the table for allyship to occur. You don't even need to be there. And I think once we get into that zone a lot more, which has started happening, because those are the ones that have actually made way for some of the conversations and spaces that we've been seeing. Let's face it, I found out, I think, was it Nancy Reagan or Roosevelt, one of the past US presidents, was such an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community that I didn't even know about. And it was interesting enough to, I think it came out in, was it First Wives, the series that they did. Yeah. And it someone kind of like went digging and they said, yeah, she was. And I was just like, wow, this is powerful. Yeah. So it's using that allyship in a time and an era, your husband is one of the most powerful, influential men on the face of the earth. And you're deciding to use that. You're deciding to risk God knows whatever he would have faced when, it was brought to him. It's like, hey, what's FLOTUS doing? Like, hey, these are not. And to have those conversations way back then, that in itself is just like, that to me is allyship. That's kind of like that brazen kind of like, I'm going to use my platform to ensure that I'm going to help you understand that difference. And if you don't understand that difference, I'm going to make sure that you don't attack it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where the true allyship kind of like stems from, when you have those who can champion on behalf of others, whether it be race, whether it be, ethnicity, whether it be color, whether it be, skill set, religion, you name it. When you really have those that begin to sit there, we live in an environment where, because of Black Lives Matter and the uprising, etc. But I've also been part of conversations where I've heard people talk about other races, and I'll be like, hey, we're not doing that.
Not doing that, yeah.
We're not doing it. Okay, you may have a preference for someone who looks like you. That's okay, not a problem. But we can't go out there and say to them or say to others, you can't say that. But we're having the same conversation in our circles. It's like, no. It's like, those who know better do better. It's like, so come on. So let's draw the line. It's like, your personal preferences, you can date, you can see whoever you want to, not a problem. But don't come out with like kind of like, no this, no that. It's just like, it's the same thing. When you go online and you see their profiles, or you come back and you go, cry me a river, this is why I don't want to. It's like, but you're sitting here in a safe space and doing it. It's like, so no. It's like, but no, I'm not advocating for them. But I'm just saying, if we want to see that change, you want that allyship, it's just like, don't do it.
Change you want to see, don't you?
Yeah.
It starts at home. So yeah. I get what
and as a friend said to me, he's like, you don't know if they're doing the same. I said, well, I would like to think that there's somebody within one of their camps who is just like me. Yeah. We just need one. Yeah. I said, I would like to think that when those conversations are happening and someone like you is doing the opposite, someone like me in the opposite field is standing up and saying, that is inappropriate. You cannot say that. I will not tolerate you saying that on any level. No. We're friends, but we're about to rumble, yeah. And you're about to put our friendship. You're about to put the friendship. Yeah, you're about to put the friendship under pressure, because that's not something you should be saying at all.
Fair enough, and I think that's fair play, and I think that's really important. That and your examples of allyship, I think, are also spot on as well. So no, thank you for sharing that. So my other question to you around the sort of motivation. So what motivates you, and what inspires you to keep going?
I think that has changed over recent years. I think the thing that used to really motivate and inspire me was that of, finally getting that recognition, whatever it may be, within my skill set, within my experience, within marketing, within comms. I think for me now, it's like, yeah, I really don't give a shit about that. I don't need you to recognize me. I don't need you to like, some people come to me, it's like, oh yeah, why do you not ever get put forward for awards and stuff? Or just like, with a panel that doesn't look like me to give me something that means nothing.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I don't want it. Don't put my name forward. But now, what motivates me and inspires me is the fact that I want to be able to use now, as I do, and still continue to do, and do it in a wider scale of how do I use the little space that my 2 feet take up in this world. That platform, how do I use it to ensure that I'm helping, I'm lifting, I'm uplifting someone else? How do I use it to be like, okay, how can you bring it together? We talk about, well, in Caribbean, and everyone talks about this, like it takes a village to raise a child. I'm just like, how can you create that global village? If I'm in comms, what Black writers do I know? If they don't exist in tech, if they don't exist in sports, okay, fine. Hey, how do we get to like going to universities or going to places and be like, hey, do you know that there's not many Black tech writers? What can we do about it? Yeah. How do I use that little space to ensure that, and I know it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but at some point in someone's lifetime, they're going to be able to look and say, I can have an all Black team from marketing to content to legal to music to production to, if I choose to, it's there. I can have a team that has representation across the LGBTQ plus spectrum, across neurodivergence, across people of faith. To me, that's what now motivates and inspires me. And that's what inspired me to found Togethr. It was just like, how do you use what you have? It's like, what's that you have in your hand? Can you use it? Are you willing to lose it? And to me, that's where I've gotten to. And that's my motivation. That's my inspiration. That's my kind of like fun. That's my joy. My friends look at me now and they go, it's like, you're all on this path. And it's like, no, it's fun. It's nice. I got up this morning and I just remembered that I knew someone that started going down in terms of video content, etc. And I was just like, I just sent him a message this morning saying, hey, I'm thinking of restarting the podcast. We should have a conversation. And it was just kind of like, it's fine. My skill set may not be as good as his or vice versa, but it doesn't matter. When the film industry started, there was no green screen. There was, just somebody on a horse, and they were just literally pulling wheels of them, like, looking like if they was in the middle of some sand, some desert, racing. That's okay. Now we have CGI, we have AI, we have all sorts of things. That's okay. It's about starting, because once you start, there will always be there'll be growth.
Yes.
So that's my motivation and inspiration.
No, that's really good. I like that, and we've got some similarities there as well. So I completely get where you're coming from. I'm on the same page on that. What did you find most challenging on your journey so far?
The Karens of the world. I think the thing I found most challenging on my journey so far is finding the strength, tapping into my core strength and inner strength of choosing my battles. And I say battles, choosing the challenges, choosing the things of which I choose to give my energies to in defense, in advocacy, in whatever form or fashion. I think for me, it was just like, sometimes you look at it, like, for example, in that case that I told you about, Jane Doe, what I really wanted to do was to go into that room and just like tear everyone a new asshole. Because I'm just like, you went for one of us, like, I'm gonna show you what Wakanda really looks like. But I had to kind of like take a step back and realize, okay, what can you do with that anger? How can you turn it into something that's going to be productive and that will have a longer lasting effect than burning it down? What can you do? I think for me, that's the most challenging thing because, when I look at scenarios, you know, I'm a rebel. So when people say you can't, I kind of be like, well, get the gasoline tank because we're about to do it. And I have to now think about, okay, fine. There's a place for burning. There's a place for that literal. There's a place for that. There are people for that. There are protesters. There are activists. And there are others who can use the other mechanisms of how you do that, how you choose those. Because in some cases, they want you to go there. They want to goad you there because, again, from a cons perspective, they've built that story. I was saying to someone, I have no desire of, I've just found out how to remove some media, newspapers off of my Apple feed, which is wonderful because, looking back at it, since Harry and Meghan have left the UK, every day on my Apple phone, there's an article either involving Harry or Meghan, predominantly Meghan, and it was just like one thing after the next, and I'm just like, yo, I'm tired. This is boring. Like, who are these writers? Why are you still like, seriously? That story has died.
Exactly.
But to me, it's still so. In that case of like, instead of like, because I went so far once, and I started making a list of all of the writers who were producing these stories, and funny enough, the majority of them were women. Probably white women. And I was like, you know what? Yeah. And I was just like, for me, that's my challenge. It's like, okay, when you start going that far, it's like, okay, you don't dedicate your energy in another space. How can you ensure that you can do something that's positive? Yes, there is going to be somebody there who has the platform to be able to pull a list of these and go onto social media and be like, yo, here's boom, here it is. We're seeing a pattern here. That's not me. And that's the most challenging thing because sometimes it's just like, Lord Jesus, do I want to see it burn?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's like, is it worth burning? I look at how, when you look at Haiti, there's a story that, I tell quite often. Haiti is a jewel. When you look at the location of Haiti in the Caribbean, it's so central. And what was done to Haiti in those times has had such an impact and effect that we're still seeing, not just in Haiti, but it's rippled across the Caribbean. It was something that said, this is what happens when you stand up against us. We will go to lengths to ensure that you will never be successful because, one of our really good, amazing singers who just turned 70 a couple of days ago, David Rudder, had sang a song, said, Haiti, we're sorry. Because of what they stood up. They were the ones that literally, that was the spark that broke the chains of physical slavery in the Caribbean. That was it. Yeah. It was that made it possible. That ripple effect, it was, even though they tried to contain it, that was the thing that really started. But what cost did it come at? Okay, for us, it was great. We're free. But then, when you look at Haiti, it's just like, damn.
Now. I know it's
the price that was paid for that burning and that torching. It's just like, and I think for me, that's the thing I'm finding challenging and having to kind of like think about, okay, does it really need to burn? And if it's burnt, does it exceed the greater good or not? Because if it doesn't exceed the greater good, makes no sense burning it because it's just going to be there. And
it's a good way of weighing up and thinking about it. Although it stops you from being too impulsive because you're like, okay,
it stops the rebel. It actually, no, it doesn't stop the rebel. It challenges the inner rebel to be creative. It challenges that, I believe in commercial activism. I believe that, when we have protesters hitting the streets, because I'm not one of those, I believe the team that's on the inside, that's sitting at the table going, do you hear them? Do you hear my brothers and sisters? Let's just pop the window open. Do you hear that roar? That deafening silence. It's not going to stop. Your news cycle's not going to change it. You can create all sorts of whatever you want. Because when we leave there, here's what we're going to do. Here's a list of your companies. And I say your companies because they contribute to your GDP. Here's a list of them. And here's what we are willing to do for 2 months, for 6 months. Because you need our money. You need our cash flow. You need it. So guess what? We're going to stop buying milk. We're going to stop buying this. Every couple of months, we're going to literally become that collective that says, here's our target for this in the next 6 months. I better pray that we don't do it all at once. Because to me, when you combine those together,
very powerful.
It's powerful. You can easily get rid of the protesters on the street.
Yeah.
You can get rid of them. You can create something, you can create the laws, you can do all sorts of things. But when I protest with my pockets, you can't get into my pocket.
Exactly.
You even with inflation, even with however, you still can't get into my pocket because you need my money for you to survive. And that to me is like when you for me, I pray for that more than anything else, because I'm just like, when we really understand the collective power of what we're doing, when we really understand instead of collectively going forward, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, but it's like getting a collective together, saying, instead of us creating scholarships for us to go to their tables, let's create our own. Because we've got scientists, we've got comms people, we've got them. So let's take that money and say, here's what we're going to put a fund that invests in this, because this is the beacon. That is when the power begins, because we're still taking ours and giving it to them. We're still in their cycle. And I think to me, that's when that commercial activism really clicks. That's when they will really think about things very differently, because at that stage, that is power.
That stage is that's the stage that I believe will affect real change. And I'm down with that. Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree. Agree with you. But no, thank you so much for that. I think that's been really helpful. Obviously, you work for yourself as a CEO, founder, but thinking back, changing your hat with your employee hat on, what would you want from your employer, based on this day and age and, based on the current societal issues? And
big fat paycheck. I mean, unlimited holidays. Oh no, but outside of that, I think what I would want for my employee, if I was in a working environment where I was not sitting at the top of the food chain, I would want to have an ally. And I say ally because while there's an understanding of what racism looks like within a work environment, I also want my employer to have an understanding of what other categoristic racisms exist. I would want my employer to not just have an understanding of what it's like as a Black person in comms and what support might be needed for that group, but also for Black, brown people of color, the intersections, not just about LGBTQ+, but also someone who's neurodivergent. Because again, we are a melting pot as human beings. What is it like to be a Black neurodivergent person working in comms?
Yeah.
Or a Black dyslexic person working in comms. Yeah. We've not thought about these things. Yeah. So for me, I would want my employer not just to think about our people, but to think about all employees, to ensure that they're creating a safe space as an organization, as a company, that allows everyone to bring their true authentic selves to work, and to see how they can support all employees as in a way that is equitable, in a way that is inclusive, and in a way that is truly diverse. I think for me, that will be, if you ask what a success look like, I think that's what it would be in that sense. And why someone might say it's just like, why you, like, my grandma, I can hear my grandmother, it's like, child, look after us. Don't worry about them, child. Don't worry about them. If we do, we would never, it would be first they came for the Irish, then they came for the blacks, then they came for the LGBTQ, then they came for the neurodivergent, then they came for, disabilities. Because, let's face it, at some point they're going to get to those, even if they aren't already doing it, in terms of like how you're positioning and framing jobs, for someone who has a disability. This job requires a lot of traveling. How do you work with a specialist to ensure that someone who has a disability and is going through that application or that process is not going to be like, this is not a safe space for me already, because you're going to have me running up and down, and if I can't run, you're going to have me wheel, all those things. So I think for me, it really kind of like, it has to be at that level. It can't just be exercise for one community or one group of people. It has to be across the board, because one thing we've all seen, imagine your workplace as a village. Imagine your entire existence as a village. You have a village of friends. You have a village of professional people. You have a village of family. You have a village at work. That's, again, powerful. When you can walk into that village in the morning and be like, hiya, and you don't have to kind of like tone yourself down. If you walk up and you're just like, you've got your hair all that, it doesn't matter. You feel safe. You feel welcome.
Yeah.
Could you imagine what production looks like?
I can imagine
the output?
Like. I can imagine it being fantastic. I just, without being pessimistic, it's just like, this would be amazing. Can you imagine it? Would I live to see it? Who knows? But it sounds amazing.
I think for me, I'm just like, would I live to see it? No. That's one thing I'm certain of. One thing I'm certain of, unless they've created some sort of drug that allows us to live beyond, because I know that the work that has to go into that is going to take generations. And it, look at what it took for us to get to this stage. People talk about, Black Lives Matter, and of course, in a comms environment, they don't call it a protest, it's an uprising. It's just like, okay, potato. We were out there, we were burning. You listened. But it wasn't necessarily, the protest behind it. It was the fact that COVID did that for us. That event that brought the world to its knees, that showed every person that you were human. That's why Black Lives Matter uprising was so powerful at the time. It wasn't because it wasn't being done already, because when you look through the history, especially in the US, it wasn't the first time they've taken to the streets in those matter. Because those mofos love to burn. They just burn it down. They burn it down. They burn it down. But because now you looked across and you had people who you watched, and someone from Italy crying at home with a body in the background of his sister wrapped up, because the authorities are saying, we ain't coming to get you because you've got COVID. You now have that person thinking, what about that Black person who someone's passed away in their house, or whatever the case is, and the police they're saying, we're not coming to get. You now know what that feels like.
That feels like.
You now know the pain that to an extent of what you get a percentage of the pain of what Black people have endured, and you don't like it. And that's what helps. That's why when you looked across the world, you were seeing places like Tokyo, Osaka. Well, Parisians love to burn again, but you were seeing places that you were looking and thinking, damn, okay, we're in this together, good. But it was because of those moments of, we're human. And if this could happen to my family, and this is what I feel, that anger, that frustration of the government's not helping me, my mayor's not helping me, no one's helping me, and I'm stuck there with trying to do all of these things. And, I'm having to rely on people around me to come and support me, people who don't look like me, but they're all connected through grief. They're all connected through that one thing. And that's what changed for us. People got to see, repairs that veil of a percentage of the pain that Black people endure. And that's why now it's become...
I agree. I also feel like part of it was a choice, though, in terms of they're choosing to now acknowledge. Because if you go back to... If you look at someone like Jane Elliott, because I don't know if you know Jane Elliott, she's wonderful. She talks a lot about race, and she does the brown-eyed experiment, the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiment, where she splits the kids up. And what I find interesting is that there's an experiment that she shows, and she's got all the white people in the audience, and she asks them, so if any of you would want to swap places with a black person, stand up now. Nobody stands up because they're fully aware of the oppression that people of color are basically dealing with. So I feel like, whilst I agree with what you're saying in terms of people were starting to be like, oh my gosh, it could affect me now, and I feel it a bit more, but also because they've chosen not to, pay any mind to them. It's like, well, this is going on, but it's not me. It's happening to them over there. And now, like you said, because it's COVID and it's affected you now, it's like, oh, okay, well, actually it's affected me. So now I'm mobilized. I'm acting, I'm activated. Yeah. So, but I find it slightly frustrating because I'm just like, really, just like the whole George Floyd thing. You watched somebody be murdered in broad daylight, which is why everyone starts putting up these black squares, and then get back to normal practice again. We start hearing noise about, you treating your employees not so great still, or whatever's going on. So it's just like, it's interesting. I feel like I'm in the middle of the ground of where I'm like, yay for some bits, and some bits it's like, really, I'm side-eyeing you. I am side-eyeing you because you guys are choosing to
you know what? And this is something we knew from all the way back then. Like I said, it's like that that grandmother side eyes like, we knew. Even with what's given now, and that's what I said. For me, I believe in that commercial activism needs to meet physical activism. They have to be combined together, because when you look through the history of time, they always give us one platitude above what we're expecting, and we take it and go, there's progress, and then we go back, and it's like, no, that ain't progress. There's never been a point in our history where we go, this ain't enough. And when I say this ain't enough, it's just like, we still going to take to the streets. Thanks for this, but guess what? We're still going to go to the streets. We're still going to burn, because unless you show us that you've put these into policies that are enacted through legal processes, unless you show us a process that we can see where the people who are meant to protect and serve all are actually doing that, we ain't stopping. Because when you look at it, yes, there's been progress. Yes, there's been a lot of, because that has opened for a lot of conversations, but you're now seeing a bit of a reversal of that. You're now seeing, you have an MP that is so brazen enough to be talking about ownership of slavery in
exactly in this 2023. What is going on out here? What is really happening?
And it's like, so for me, it's like, no, we need to, and I think this is where for us now, the things that we have learned, the skill sets that we've had, that we've cultivated, this is where we now begin to learn how to use them. From music to legal to comms to PR to digital. How do we put them all together? How do we create more spaces like We Are Black Journals, like Gems in the podcast, as the UK Black Comms Network? How do we create more of those? And how do we start connecting outside of the spaces we're creating, so that when we're putting into something, we're going, you know what? Juneteenth is Juneteenth, but here's what we're going to create. We are going to create our winter of discontent. And that starts across the globe from September 31st and does not end until March 1st. And here's what we're going to do. Here's a list of companies we are not going to support.
Yes.
For those next 6 months.
That I think sounds great. I'm down with all that. Absolutely.
And here's what we're going to do. Just like, oh, by the way, we're calling upon artists. We're calling upon those who have deep pockets within investment, within music, within all of the regions. It's just like, we don't want you to give us money. What we want you to do is to be able to create opportunities. You know what? Because there is a Black person who wants to create a dairy farm. Fund it. Yeah. There is a Black person who wants to create an alternative to one of the companies where let's fund it. Let's build for us. Yeah. Let's build for us. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's and invest in it and support it. And literally, that's when the real dance is going to happen. Because at that stage, it's like, Oh, it's like, yeah, we burning, but you know what? Fine. We're gonna pause for 2 seconds because here's what's gonna hurt you a lot more. Because we saw what COVID did when it brought the world to the knees. The minute the world stops turning, the minute money starts not exchanging hands, it lost every single value that it had.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of friends and family and relatives, etc. We still have a lot of mental and trauma attached to COVID that we're still now even beginning to scratch the surface of how do we deal with it moving forward. But one of the joys of successes it brought was understanding, tapping into our true value of looking at things now and going, what are you giving me? You had to sit down and look at your bills and you went, hey, Sky, why am I paying you £85 for? Why am I paying you? Yeah, I'm gone. Bye.
Yeah, it's true.
No,
it was very
I don't want to pay holiday. No, I don't want to pay holiday. I'm gone. Bye. We need more of those. And we need to have them ripple because guess what? From a commercial perspective, I always tell people, day one, you will weather the storm. Day two, you'll weather the storm. Week one, you'll weather the storm. By the time you get to the next board meeting and shareholders meeting, and there's a dip beyond 5%, your shareholders are going, I don't care what happened. Fix it. I don't care what you need to do. Fix it. My wife can't get on that private jet, mofo. So fix it. Or else I'm going to find someone to fix it. And it mightn't be you. That's when that's the power that you have. That's the power that you hold. When you look at companies in terms of when governments give these massive bailouts, etc. That's why. Because you know what? You account for 5% of the GDP. If you fall, that's 5%. So guess what? If we have to spend 2% to prop you up, and and to me, it's like we have all of these skill sets. We have all of them within our community already. We have them. We work amongst them.
Mobilize it a bit more, don't we? And activate it, really. We do. We definitely.
How do we? Yeah.
We do. It's just moving that forward and looking at how we do that. Which is why you've got organisations called Togethr, getting together. But it makes sense. But okay, bring it back a little bit to the workplace. So one of the questions I also had was about what makes a good working environment. And I might as well add in there, what does DEI look like to you within that environment? I think you kind of alluded to it before, which is about, having, a fair environment. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, and it's really expanded upon that. It's having an environment where everyone is able to bring their true, authentic selves to work.
Yeah.
And have a space, a trusted and safe space that they can have conversations without being ridiculed, without being harassed, but also being able to understand from others. For example, I used to go into an office and I'll have a bacon sandwich every morning, but I wasn't considerate that one of my team members, my colleagues, is Muslim.
Yeah.
So it's like, how is that impacting them?
Yeah.
And it's only until it was kind of like brought to me, just like, that's why we have, a workroom space. And my response was at the time, I was just like, well, I'm like a slave here. I ain't got time to move from my desk. You want me to move from my desk? I ain't got time for that, But if the work environment said, hey, it's okay to take a break, and to actually have the appropriate training so that my line manager isn't going, you're in the staff room again.
Yeah.
Every time I see you, you're always eating. It's like, excuse you? How dare you? Like, you see, like,
you don't count how many press releases I just sent across or how many, plans I've written.
Yeah.
You're counting how many times you see me eat food.
Yeah. Because again, especially as for young, impressionable employees, when people say these passive aggressive things, especially in the passing and with senior peers, it doesn't look good. You don't feel good. And now you're like, oh my God, I can't leave my desk, because if I leave my desk, it's like, all you're hearing is a comment of, you're always eating, like you're always in the staff room, you're always doing this, you're always doing that. So I think for me, it has to have a balance of that work environment, that everyone has that space. It has to, what does DEI look like? It's really being able to put the work in of getting qualified people to be able to have those conversations and understanding that it may not just be one person, because one person may not necessarily have the experience to be able to give an account for all persons in terms of their lived experience. I always tell people, it's like, listen, I'm Black. I can tell you about my lived experience, but I can't speak for everyone else. No. So do not at any point in time, when you ask me questions, think that my answer is reflective and representative of all Black people. Right. No way. Don't do that. And it's the same for other things, I think. And, that's what needs to happen. Okay, yes. Should there be a center point within the organization? I 100% agree. But within that, there should be working groups. There should be investment into, okay, we're focusing on neurodivergence. We need someone within that space to work with our main DI person to ensure that we are aligning properly while working with those who identify as neurodivergent within the company or the organization, and so forth and so forth. And that's what, what makes a good working environment, but also what connects back to what does good DI look like in terms of that base, but also acknowledging no company or organization is ever going to be able to fix everything all at once, because it still needs to be funded. It still has to have a cost attached to it. Yes, there are some instances where that work can happen and that work is costed and it's there, but there's some instances when the conversations that are happening upstairs is like, can we really keep Jane, Karen, and Sarah and Kevin at the same time? And is this the right time for us to be talking about pulling a DEI program, et cetera, and I know some people, that, of course, there's difference of opinions, but it's about working with the organizations as well. And I think the only time that could happen is if employees feel trusted enough to do that. Because it's the same thing when you're at home or you're growing up, your parents would be like, come on, we want you to eat this. And you'd be like, Mommy, I don't want to eat that. And mother was like, just eat one, just one more for Mommy. I promise you, one more. Yeah. Good. Thank you. You have to work together. Yes, okay, I know Mommy was bullshitting me because guess what? I still had to eat more than one scoop. Yes. But there was that acknowledgement for that one moment of, okay, here's what, let me work with you. And I think that needs to happen on both sides. And I don't think it happens because we don't trust people. We don't trust them for good reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't deny that. It's a good reason to do it.
The side eye.
Yes. Yeah, I get it. No, thank you. I think that's really, really, really important what you said as well. So I'm going to move into proudest moments and then mindset, and we'll be finishing soon. But proudest moments, tell us about your proudest moment. It could be work, it could be personal, and what has been a particular career highlight for you.
Ooh, proudest moment. Gosh, there's so many of them.
I think my proudest... forming together should be definitely up
I know,
there.
So
I'm sitting here looking at you like, hello, this is the first what's going on?
Yeah, I know. It's just like I was trying to be a bit humble, I just, just like, yeah. But founding together, I think for me, together has been, the idea has been one in its making in different iterations for over 8 years. I think it landed where it landed. And now I'm excited for what comes next because I'm now able to dedicate my time full time to it as we're about to start fundraising. But up until that point, we were trying to do so much of everything, and it was just kind of like we were putting it into different vehicles, and it just wasn't working. And you could tell it wasn't working because when you talk to people about it, it'd be like, say what? Go again. So I think my proudest moment with that was being able to understand that you can't be everything to everyone all at once.
Yeah.
And being able to, strip the noise out and focus on the end user. In our case, what do we want to do? We want to create a safe environment that our communities can interact and engage with, and build communities so that they can interact and engage with. And while they're doing that, still have authentic conversations with brands, whether that be a digital gig economy for someone who is producing items or creating t-shirts, etc., or has a sports business, etc., or has a fitness business, whatever it may be, alongside other brands. We want to be able to for that to circulate within our communities, having that sort of like global village. Considering, if you were to put the ones that we could account for within across the spectrum together, we'll probably be the fifth largest country in terms of GDP globally. And to me, that's powerful when when you start looking at those statistics that come into place. For me, I was just like, yeah, this is the space for us. So that was one of my proudest moments. One of my other proudest moments from a personal component was, which is what led to Togethr being birthed in the first place, was to be able to really bring my true authentic self across everything that I do. As Black people, we're always heralded as being aggressive or too private or too this and this. And it was just like, well, first off, we're private because we don't want you in our business because you talk.
It's a
Monday morning, when you sit with that cup of tea and you go, no,
Yes.
no. You talk too much. Yeah. We're not private for everyone. We're private for you. Because you talk. As my grandmother, bless her soul, she had many sayings, and one of them was, those who bring carry. So when you bring in that news, nasa namixme. So for me, it was just kind of like being able to kind of like really truly come to terms with being LGBTQ plus, being gay, within a professional setting. It was from one thing that I realized that there was lots of triggers of things, I'm terribly late most times. But I realized that I had a lot of anxiety for Monday mornings. And it was because of that sort of like, water cooler conversation of, oh my God, what did you guys do on the weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course, when you say, oh yeah, you and your partner, it's like, oh, you mean girlfriend? And of course, over the years, people, and as I got a bit more senior, the resistance and the comments that came after that slowed down. But in the very beginning, it was just like, what do you mean partner? You mean like girl? As you got older and a bit more senior, and you go, oh yeah, my partner and I, nobody asked any questions.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, I'm going to drag you in front of HR, Karen. Drag you. No, we're not doing this today. Yes. But even with that, I still had that level of anxiety of, oh my God, this is really uncomfortable. And I watched how easy everyone else was able to talk about their weekends, and no one batted an eyelid. And I couldn't talk about my weekend in the same way because I'm just kind of like, and of course, then you bring in the sort of like conversation about race. It's like, oh yeah, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh yeah, oh, it was Notting Hill weekend. Oh, I guess you went to some Jamaican party. It's just like, yeah, I'm from Trinidad.
Get it right.
Okay, we love our Jamaican brothers and sisters as much as they love us, and the same way they will look at you.
Islands.
If you ever say or refer to them as Trini or Bajan or whatever it is, we respect each other, we love each other, and we bring our own identity. So no, go back, you do the work. Go and do the work. Go do the work. So I think for me, it was about, my proudest moment was being able to come out in a professional space. And then I have to give thanks to, as I call him, my CEO advisor, Chris Ward, somebody I met, and he became such a close mentor and advisor, and is also part of Togethr as part of the advisory board. And I sat with him and I was talking about stuff, and I said, I'm having doubts about things, and I wouldn't be able to do this. And he's like, okay, so what's your problem? This is a straight white man. He's just like, anyone who has an issue with your sexuality, you shouldn't be doing business with them anyway.
Absolutely.
And to me, I was just like, that was it. He was like, no. He said, I don't give a fuck. He said, excuse my language, sorry, censor. As he said, at any time you find yourself in an environment where your color, your ethnicity, where you come from, your sexuality, your gender identity is an issue, he said, walk away.
I agree.
He said,
I completely agree.
And that to me was,
Sacrifice.
again, an example of allyship, but also an
Yeah.
example of, because that gave me, it allowed me to tap into, I wouldn't say it gave me, it allowed me to tap into my confidence. And that to me pulled that part. So when I walk in now and, people go, oh, you don't look anything like what you sound. It's like, oh, okay, sure, no problem. It's like, so will we be doing business together? No, because you don't look anything like what you are.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, I was like, yeah, we're going to do that. I mean,
Yeah,
I need
and
your
I
money,
think that's
but
good.
no, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But it really gave me that.
That confidence
career,
to do that, right?
it did.
Oh,
Career highlights. I would say starting Togethr. When I say starting, as in, I recently made a decision that I wanted to focus on it full time. So I left the safety of the 9 to 5 job. Like, as one of my old directors used to say to me, it's just like, we have the day job and the gay job. So I left the day job and I started the gay job. And now it's now it's the full time, and
I love it. Now the gay job is the day job. There you go.
Yeah. And I'm excited about it, and I think for me, out of all of the highlights, I call it a highlight because to be able to leave your job in one of the most testing times, and not know where, as my grandmother would say, she's like, what you are do? How you gonna pay the bills? Love don't pay the bills.
Yes.
She's like, love doesn't feed empty bellies. But for me, I'm just like, if not now, when?
When, yeah.
And I think just having that motivation, just having that insight of not knowing beyond the next 4 weeks how the bill's going to be paid is exciting enough to be able to say, you know what, I can do this. What better time to do this in? Because there will always be something. Okay, yeah, it's cost of living today. It might be another crisis. Yeah, so I'm like, so that's my career highlight.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what are your thoughts on how the industry will evolve over the next few years? Just maybe a top 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. I think we will start seeing a lot more Black people within comms. I think where the industry needs to evolve is ensuring that we shatter that glass ceiling and see people transition from having mid-level to junior roles to more mid-level to mid-senior to senior roles, and being able to put the work in. I remembered having a conversation at one of my previous, companies when we were talking about we're not getting enough diverse, skilled people through the doors. Like, well, why don't we create a program that says, hey, we'll work with a consultant who has all the skills and experience that is needed, but we're going to hire this candidate, and that's the investment we're going to make into this candidate.
Yeah.
Because if you really want to see that diversity, and
you make it work, right? You make it work.
Even though we know there's enough of us out there that you could pick one of us, but so I think for me, it's about really seeing a lot more representation at a senior level. We're still yet to see, that, replicated across where you're seeing a lot more Black senior persons within comms leading that charge, leading that forefront, and, not just being put there for tokenism.
Yeah. Because,
again, we don't trust them for reasons. It's just like, why did you give me this job? Why me? Because I'm watching you. Why me?
Mm-hmm.
That let's face it, we will always have that question that will come up for us when we're giving these roles within the early coming years. Because it's like, are you really giving me this role, or are you giving me this role?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think I'd love to see that. I'd also love to see investment in EDI and understanding the challenges of how you reach different communities, especially within comms. You can't say that you want to have diversity within your comms team or your comms organization when you're only posting ads within the Sunday Times or the Telegraph.
Exactly.
Listen, we ain't reading those newspapers.
No.
So
it's like, get to the right media,
Pick somebody else. Pick somebody else. Yeah. So I'd love to see those things where they're understanding and working with community leaders or working with communities to really understand where you are. Where's your natural spot? Where do you go to hydrate? Where do you drink? Where do you refresh? To really understand what that looks like and bring it into the sphere. Yeah, and make it fun.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Thank you for that. I agree. And what would you say the key lessons you've learned throughout your years? Maybe, I don't know, 3 key lessons you've learned.
Be unapologetic.
Mm-hmm.
Stop saying sorry. I think as Black people, we do it too many times.
We do it a lot.
You know, and bless my mentor and others who've been like, what are you sorry for? Why are you sorry? Why? It's no. We need to, it's that mental slavery thing.
Yeah.
Trust your skill set, trust your experience, trust your growth, and don't second guess it. The third one, build a village while you're on your journey. Because it makes no sense that, we're all fighting to get to the top. And it's like, when I get to the top, I'll reach my hand down. Because for you to reach your hand down while you're at the top to pull one other person up, that takes a lot of effort. But if you're going, and while you're going, hey, come with me. You come with me. And you're going up together, it's a lot more effortless than you trying to get that, or us trying to push that one person and thinking when they get to the top, they'll help us. Because again, that's a lot of pressure. Heavy is the crown. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone, whoever that person may be. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. We're always trying to find that one Black savior. And it's like, no, we were brought up in villages. That's our power. That's our strength. That's our superpower. Let's go back to it. Let's reiterate in 2023, what does the village look like for us now? Because in the olden days, it was a village. It was things like Gayab. It was things like trading. When you're building your house, your parents will come and they'll cook the food. Somebody will bring the rum. And then literally they'll build a house for you.
Yes.
Boom. Yeah.
Yes.
So now what does that look like? It's now a case of, oh, you're starting a business. Okay, well, I've got marketing skills. I can give you 2-3 hours, but actually, you know what? I know a good comes first. Hey, Cyril, let's get on this, because guess what? We're hedging our bets. It's going to be good. I know Ebony. Ebony's got an amazing podcast. Hey, Ebony, young Black person coming up here. Let's look at how we look at what Village 2023 looks like and bring that in.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's brilliant. And then my other question would be, what advice would you give to young people of color considering entering the industry?
Learn your inner strength. And it's probably very hard to say that, especially for young people, because you're all about finding yourself at that age. And I didn't find myself until God knows how many years later. Probably still finding myself now. I think we
continue to evolve and find ourselves as well. So I get you on that one.
Yeah. Tap into your inner strength. Choose your battles. Be strategic. Don't just put down the kerosene and the flame because you think that if you torch it, then it's no. If you're putting it down, be strategic. But why are you putting it down? What are you getting? What do you have left? In exchange for that. Yeah. So that would be it.
So onto mindset. How would you say you deal with the internal mind war that we all as human beings go through? And add on to that one, how do you manage your self-limiting beliefs as well? You can tag that on too.
Okay, sure thing. So that one I'm still learning a lot on. What I have learned about it and how do I deal with that in internal mind war at the moment is, sometimes I write things down, and sometimes I bring them afterwards because I don't want them to be found or I don't want to see them again. But it just helps to take them out of my head and put them on paper. For some others, writing them and going back to them might help, but whatever your process is, you go through it. And the first thing that I did in terms of dealing with it was literally to just allow myself to rant on paper, leave it for a day or two, then go back to it again, let it ruminate, go back to it again, and then from there, put the pros and cons. And it's just like, okay, fine. Because the thing that I have noticed as Black people, we have that fire in us. Lord knows where from, but we have it. So when things happen, or we see red, like the minute someone says boo, it's just like, yeah. So it's like, how do we take that fire, acknowledge that it's there, embrace it, don't let it control us, and then focus on what comes next? And I think that focusing then becomes the pros and the cons. And then for me, I always put what is the outcome? What do I want to happen? What do I want to see happen out of this? And then strategize. And I've been able to kind of like take it from my mind to pen and paper. And then now it's gone back to my mind. So most times when things happen, my old boss always used to say to me, he was just like, you're always like 5 steps ahead. It's like, that's my job. I'm in comms. My job is to be 5 steps ahead of you because I need reputation management, crisis comms, you name it, whatever it is. I need to be 5 steps ahead. So when you come and say X, is like, here you go. And what about, here's the other 4 things. That's why we can't say this. That's why you will say this. Here's the point. Boom.
Yes.
And I started doing that with everything else in terms of that internal mind war, whatever you're facing with, whether it's like you're not confident enough, you shouldn't be there, whatever it is, and you not find a way, but you find your process and go, okay. But also in part of that, accept it. Okay, I don't know everything. I don't know everything about building together. I'm not probably one of the best persons when it comes to community building or community presence within the LGBTQ plus space, but I ain't gonna stop me from building this.
Yeah.
Because so for me, that was my internal mind war. Just like you're not the person to do this. I remember I had a conversation with someone a couple of years back when I first started the other iteration, and we were talking about stuff. And they said to me, "Why didn't you come to me before? We know each other, we see each other, we're in the same spaces. Why not?" And I said, I didn't think I had, the authority. I didn't think I had the experience. I didn't think I had the credibility. And they just said, they literally looked at me as like, nonsense. Don't ever. Doesn't matter when you join the race. The fact is that you've joined the race. You've got off the side, you put the running shoes on, and you're there. So we're going to take the numbers. So let's do this. And it's the same thing for anyone who's going through those kind of like battles, because we go through them. We go through them on our own. And then when we step into environments, people say things to us intentionally or otherwise, and it throws us off. Like, oh, you're always eating. How would you say that to someone? You don't, okay, fine. For me, it was my work ethic, but for someone who may have been struggling with eating, etc., wow, like seriously. So whatever it is that you're facing, face it. Okay, fine. I'm this, but here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to get from one stage to the other. There's somebody that I follow on social media, and they posted something recently, and they were just like, "Why do you follow me?" And I posted back. I said, on your unapologetic, like what you said, like your conversations about planting versus plantain. I said, but also I'm silently stalking until I work up the courage to be able to actually message you. And I was just like, for me, just writing that alone was just like, but I'm like, no, I'm going to face my fear. I'm going to face it. And I think that's my encouragement to anyone who knows. And again, how do you manage that self-limiting beliefs? It's all the same. It's just like being able to understand it, being able to not necessarily embrace it in terms of accepting it, acknowledge it. Don't embrace it, acknowledge it. Because when you embrace it, you're sitting down saying, this is my limitation. No. I acknowledge that I have self-limiting beliefs, and I could tell you what those are. And here's my plan of how I'm going to move from this point to that point. Here's my plan of how I'm going to be able to address this bit. And also working on it, just like, you don't have to do everything all at once. it's not a race.
Yeah.
Don't let, for us within comms, we always look at these 30 under 30, 20 under 20, 15 under 15, 5 under 5. It's just like, listen.
This gets a lot. No.
It's a lot. But when people go like, how come you never did? I said, well, first, I never wanted to be in any of those spaces because I work in marketing. The first rule in marketing and also extends to comm is, if you don't want your business out there, don't put it. Comms/PR 101. First thing. Second thing, all I had to say to them is Morgan Freeman. And people look at me and they go, huh? When did look at the age at which Morgan Freeman started his successful career?
Yeah. He was much older. Yeah.
Season. Yeah. Growth.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, I'm just like, I'm Morgan Freeman. When I turn up,
Viola Davis. Look at Viola Davis. She started very seasoned, and she's amazing. Yeah. Amazing.
Oh yeah. So that's to me how I look back on dealing with my internal mind war, but also then how I manage the self-limiting beliefs. And I'll also be honest. There's some days it gets to me. There's some days when I can't shake it. There's some days where none of those processes work. And again, I say to people, go through the motion.
Yeah.
Bishop T.D. Jakes always talks about it. It's just like, sometimes the best way over a mountain is straight through the motherfucker.
Yeah.
Go through it.
Go through it.
Because when you come out on the other end, you will learn so much about yourself. You will learn so much so that the next time it happens, you're in a position where you're like, first off, you can recognize it coming. And the minute you're able to recognize it coming, you're able to set yourself into that mind frame of, what do I need to do mentally, emotionally? What support do I need from people around me? How do I ensure that I'm, putting those things in place? So yes.
Yeah, no, that's really good. No, I appreciate all those answers, and I agree. And I also think going through your processes, but also finding your escapism. So if you need to have a duvet day, have a duvet day. If you need to watch some comedy shows, which is what I love to do because laughter helps me. I'm like, yes, go and have some joy for the soul. But just don't stay there. Make sure you come back out of it essentially. So I agree with you completely. So looking back over your journey, would you do it all over again, Kevin?
Hell fucking yes.
Hey, that's what
you know what? Yeah, you know what? Sometimes if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have probably looked at you and be like, oh no, if I did it, I would have done this differently and I've done that differently. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm not into these space continuum things anymore. I'm like, I am very pragmatic, very realistic. It's just like, I will do it all over again the same way because I enjoy every experience of what has brought me to where I am today. Because those experiences actually built me. Those failures of, starting a business for 5 years and it not being successful in terms of actually getting a paying client led to me being able to turn around for the second business. And within 6 months, literally went from 0 to 100, literally.
And that's what
in the shortest space of time.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm just like, my whole mantra and things now is there's always success. Even in failure, there's success. Because in failure, guess what? You're successful. You now know what not to do.
Yeah.
You now know what to do faster. And if you still don't know what to do, you keep testing, you keep failing until you get to that point where it's just like, that's it. Because that growth that happens is what adds to your value. When people come and said, why are you charging £1,000 a day? It's just like, you want me to tell you why? Because for 10 years, I failed at this business. 10 years, I tested every single thing of what not to do, and I failed at it. So guess what? Me executing your business for you successfully in 2 days is 10 years of my experience I've been able to give you in 2 days.
Yeah.
You're gonna pay for my trauma.
That's right. I do not blame you. You're gonna pay for it all. Yeah, and they can mostly afford it most of the time anyway. So I completely get that. That's hilarious. So you would do it all over again? Yes, like to hear that. So this is my last couple. So what's the best and the worst advice you've been given? Now, I hope you have a funny worst one. I'm hoping for one, but I don't know.
Worst advice? don't worry, it will all work out. Just trust, it will all work out. I'm just like, no, it doesn't just all work out. No, you gotta have a plan. Okay, okay. You're in black, so you could sit there with your trust
you
fund
have
and
to
say
plan.
that's sweet.
You got a plan.
It's like, no, 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 no. Best advice given: slow down, stop looking at others, don't compare yourself to others, and life begins at 40.
Life begins at 40.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That was for me, for the things I was experiencing, etc., etc. To me, it was just like, the best advice ever because, again, I took very different pathways. I'm a rebel. So, I don't believe in, I believe education is a tool and it helps, but I don't believe that it's something that we should just prop up as our savior. I think that's what we tend to do a lot within the Black communities. We just be like, everybody's for education, you're just like, and it's just like, whoa, what if my pathway is different from education?
It could be different, yeah.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's, and I also, went through experiences where I was looking at my siblings, and when I remember when I was going to do my second degree, my sister had already finished her master's, and she's 5 years younger, and it was all of those kind of like mental thoughts that were just kind of like, yeah. So yeah, best advice given.
Best advice. Okay, well, I appreciate that. I think that's interesting, and I think your worst advice is hilarious. So my last question is, do you have any rules that you've implemented to help you along your career journey that you'd like to share? A couple nuggets or gems?
Oof. Gosh, I think that's a lot of them. Ones that always kind of like come to mind is find what your boundaries are, know them, embrace them, and draw the line with them. That was one rule that I've realized that, especially within marketing, especially within comms, especially within PR, if you don't have boundaries, especially as a Black person, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it destroys beings. So have those boundaries. Know them and draw the line with them. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. My name is Kevin, not Kevy. We ain't friends.
Yeah.
But your boss, no, my boss is Black, so she can call me Kev. You, Karen, gonna call me Kevin.
Okay.
Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, nothing else. Why? Because we're not friends. This is a professional environment. That's my boss. I have that relationship with my boss. You, not my boss.
Yeah.
So no, it's little things like that literally, and don't be afraid. Draw them.
It's a good point. It's a very, very good point.
Really decide, not just picking your battles, but be strategic about how you engage in battles, whether it be mind wars, whether it be work environments, whether it be whatever, some people tend to say I'm a bit of a control freak. Maybe I am, but I'm just like, I pick my battlefield. You're not going to choose my battlefield for me. You're not going to force me to any battlefield.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to do that for you. I used to play chess, and I didn't realize that, chess playing, for all its intents and purposes, while I wanted to do something that was not the conventional, let's play football, because every Black person wants to play football and get a culture, because God knows that's what parents wanted. I was like, I'm going to play chess. And just like, but it's like, that's white people's sport. Where are you going with that, boy?
That's a good sport. You got to teach me, Kevin. You can teach me. Because I want to learn chess.
I didn't realize.
I want to learn it.
I would teach you because it taught me strategy. It taught me to think 5, 10 steps ahead. When people used to sit down, you play chess and they'll be like, I can beat you in 5 moves. I'd be like, oh, nonsense. Bap, bap, bap. Oh, fuck. So for me, I'm just like, when you're picking your battles or whatever they are, be strategic about them. Ensure that, you're having them as much as possible on your terms, on your grounds. And I think that's probably why when I started my career in comms, I accelerated alongside my base in marketing, because in comms, it's about not just choosing the battles, but it's also choosing the playing field.
Yeah.
And you have to be strategic about what that playing field is going to be. That's going to give you that home advantage or whatever it is. And guess what? This is life. These things don't always work out the way they're meant to be. Sometimes you're on home turf. Sometimes you're not on home turf. Have your backup plan. Even when you're not on home turf, how do you get from not home turf to home turf? How do you get them chasing behind you so that you get to know and be like, motherfucker, you're my ends now.
Yeah,
you're in the South.
That's it. You're here.
Here's how we do things in the South. Yeah. Now it's my turn.
Yeah.
Enjoy life. Embrace it. Don't focus on what others have. I think that was a rule that I had to implement very early because, when you grow up in societies where it's kind of like always that, and having those conversations of, especially when you talk to family, is, oh yeah, your friend you went to school to is now a dentist. Oh, great for him.
Yes, yeah. This
he
one's
also has 10 kids.
One's an accountant.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He also has 10 kids and a gambling habit. I don't know, but thanks.
Let's put into context.
Yeah. Let's just bring it down. Yeah. You're just focusing on the dentist part and all the other things are just like shambles. So it's about really kind of like, recognizing that you're not competing against anyone. You are one of one. And I think that's the most powerful thing across this entire world. Unless we get into cloning, you will always be one of one. So there's nobody that can compete with you but yourself.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And your clothes. Yeah. But as long as you, because that brings your realization to self-work, reflection, inflection, looking at yourself as opposed to, what does this one have to the left of me? What does this one have to the right of me? It's like, no, what do you have? Okay, what am I happy about today? What have I achieved today? Okay, great. What am I not so happy about? Okay, this one I'm going to work on. This, and here's how I'm going to get there. And it really kind of like homes in your focus to you. Because as long as for me, those are like the top three. When you do those things, it's just kind of like, it's not being selfish. People go, oh, it's always about you. Well, yeah, it's about me, motherfucker. It's me. It's my life.
It's alive.
It's called, it's mine. So I'm allowed to be selfish for these things. But when you are, and you focus on yourself in that way, and you do the work on yourself, and again, I started realizing those things very late on in the game. But once I realized it, I was just like, things started moving a lot smoother. Like, I kid you not, it was just kind of like, it was like if nothing else mattered, it's like, oh, great, you're a dentist. Oh, that's really good for you. What are you doing? Well, I'm in comms, or I'm doing this. Oh, okay, nice seeing you. Bye.
Yeah. Because you were in your flow. Your flow.
There's no flays. There's no kind of like, and be proud about it. Again, it's about in that inflection. You're allowed to, we have behaviors that subconsciously are linked again to slavery. And they still show it to you. We ever watch is like the slave with the hands tied and the face down. And if you look at people, especially Black people, when they're not proud about themselves, they almost get into that position. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna say with my chest.
Yeah.
That's it.
Your chest, absolutely.
As my grandmother says, you just said, run out with your whole chest. Run out. So I think for me, while I have all sorts of others, I think those were the ones that really gave a grounding of me and allowed everything else to flow in a way that, there's lots of other things, don't let people, walk over you, know your own value, blah, blah, blah. But all of those come afterwards, because if you don't do these things of that work on you, you can't get to your boundaries are tied to your beliefs, your ethics, how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you see others, identifying about those challenges and how you find your way to be strategic about your battles again goes back to, okay, when these things are beyond my boundaries and people step in my boundaries, what am I going to do? Or if I'm somewhere else and I have to draw a line in somebody's playing field with my boundaries, how do I ensure I survive till I get back to my space? And then the third part about that inflection work, about seeing where you've come from, where you're going, and where you want to get to, ties back to those. And as long as you focus on those three things, the rest becomes, you create such an insular powerhouse that nothing else matters. You create secondary levels of rules, and they help you. Like I have rules for Togethr that I'm now implementing. You have rules in your own way. I have rules for personal stuff. I have rules for professional stuff, but they all spin back into I'm the constant in that equation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's been really helpful. That was great. Thank you, Kevin. Amazing. We've come to the ending of your interview, but it's been wonderful speaking with you. And I thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's been wonderful to hear. So for our listeners, if anyone wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Leonce. There's two of us. Look for the one that says CEO of Togethr. That's it really. All my other social media kind of stuff, I am in the process of trying to decide. They've always been private because I've never been one to kind of like post quite a lot on social media. So now I'm kind of like going through this process, of course, as I'm building Togethr. It's like, you've got to be able to share a lot more about that journey and that process. And also for me to be able to open up and share, because I realize that we don't do a lot of this, and a lot of things are glamorized. I sat on this sofa and I took a laptop and I built a business from 0 to 100. It's like, no, motherfucker, nobody does that. You lying. You leaving things out. That's the common story.
There's a whole load of stuff you there.
Messaging. Yeah.
They went for the one key message. This is what we done.
This is what we done. So I think talking about those and sharing those is really quite helpful, and being really real and authentic about it. Listen, this shit is painful. I'm appreciate for you building a podcast, building a network, building all of these things when we're going against the grain of what society and tradition and institutionalized companies and organizations want to portray in this world, which is a reflection that doesn't involve us. For the time being, is difficult. And to be able to share those and to let someone know, even if it's one person that's going to go to bed knowing, oh my gosh, I'm having a similar thing and there's hope for me. Okay, today is a shit day. I may be broken. The lights may be cut tomorrow. But guess what? Hey, he was in the same situation. And even though we're different, my lights may cut, but at least when the lights are cutting, something might actually come out of that for me. There's hope. I know there's hope, and it's being realistic about it and not be selling this kind of like story of, everything is just magically going to wave. We don't have fairy godmothers.
No, exactly.
We have villages. We have villages.
You know what? That reminds me though, also around COVID, because it was like, everyone was like, oh my gosh, struggle. It was like, Black people, we know how to struggle. We can do this. We can do this. It's not a problem.
When it's like, you've got to cut this out, you've got to cut this out. I remember saying to my to my partner, I just went, he's like, you seem fine with this. I think it was when we had lockdown and everybody had to be home for 3 months. I was like, I said, I lived through a coup. He said, what do you mean? He said, what do you mean a coup? I said, in 1990, in Trinidad and Tobago, a particular religious sector overthrew the government, bombed the police station, which is to this day, it's still not been built back. And they stormed into parliament and they shot and killed some people, including the prime minister, who was shot and was still alive at the end. The city was burnt to cinder. I said, so I know what it is to stay in your house. At least here, they're not passing by with guns and, shooting to make sure that you're inside. He's like, what? I was like, yeah, I know what it is to be without electricity. He's like, what? I was like, again, cool. He's like, I was like, listen, this is a breeze. Going up. Like, people are like civil liberties. I'm like, bless them, the British.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious.
But it's really those things. And I think, again, during COVID and a lot of those things, it really allowed me to like tap into those moments. I look back on it and wasn't things to be proud of, because again, people go, oh my God, Muslim people are terrorists, blah, blah, blah. They overtook your country. Why do you? I was like, no, they did what they felt was needed to have been done, because at the time, what was taking place within the government wasn't really, it was again, cost of living and employment, you name it, so it's not dissimilar.
It's not one, it's very similar.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating when you hear those sort of arguments, because it's like, well, no, look at it properly, unpeel it, pick it.
Yeah.
So yes, no, but thank you so much, Kevin. We're going to wind
You're
up this
welcome.
because I will talk to you all day because it's been great.
I know.
So thank you for tuning in to Gems Income series special for the 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast. So thank you, everyone. Don't forget to follow Kevin on LinkedIn, connect with him. He'll be on there. It was Kevin Leonce, and he is the founder CEO of Togethr. So thanks again, and stay tuned. I will be back with more wonderful people from the world of comps. Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye for now. Thanks again for having me.